Fling, Diane Kimbrell. The year was 1961. There were no internet dating sites at the time. There was no internet. Nobody owned a computer. But there were blind dates. In spite of the marvels of technology and the passing of time, I'm convinced that the heart's yearning for and the anticipation of a romantic, enchanted evening has always been with us and will always remain. The movie Breakfast at Tiffany's was released that same year, and the romantic song from the show, Moon River, became a big hit. I was a senior in high school, and the weekend I had longed for and dreamed about was off to the worst possible start. My blind date for Spring Fling, an annual event at Davidson College, was an hour and a half late. A senior in high school like myself, he was driving from Greenville to look over the Davidson campus. A private Southern college in North Carolina, Davidson enjoyed a prestigious reputation because America's 28th president, Woodrow Wilson, attended the institution. My best friend, Wanda, and her boyfriend, Belvin, strolled arm in arm up the aisle of the theater to the lobby. Following at a respectable distance, I allowed just enough of the other members of the audience to step in front of me so that I wouldn't lose sight of them. I preferred to stay in my seat at intermission, but Belvin insisted that I come along. Out in the lobby, while Belvin and Wanda cooed and whispered to each other, I stood near them but remained aloof, picking imaginary lint off my black pleated skirt. Black is known to be a slenderizing color. I could feel the couples around us staring at me, wondering why, I supposed, I was there alone. Belvin caught my eye and winked several times to acknowledge my presence. But my best friend, Wanda, ignored me. She began to ignore me when my blind date did not show up on time. Finally, Belvin said, "Don't worry, Niki. He'll be here soon. Friday night's a date night. Traffic's always heavy. Remember," he grinned, "Greenville's about 100-mile drive." I forced a confident smile in his direction, but when I said nothing, he turned back to Wanda. I could think of nothing to say. Anger and disappointment had rendered me speechless. Virgil Grimble, or maybe his last name was Gamble, was the cousin of one of Belvin's fraternity brothers. Belvin had never met him. Because Wanda's mother wouldn't let her attend Spring Fling alone, Wanda made Belvin arrange a blind date for me. I assumed I would be with one of the brothers from the fraternity he pledged. But Belvin claimed a cousin of a brother was the best he could do. When I hesitated to accept the invitation, Wanda reminded me that most of the girls at our school would give an arm or a leg to go to Davidson for a weekend and attend fraternity parties, not to mention a live concert featuring the Drifters. "Mama won't let me go if you don't go," Wanda pouted. I knew by the sound of her voice that Wanda would never speak to me again if I didn't agree to attend. She also said, "I know Mama wants you to spy on me and make sure I sleep at the dorm with you and the rest of the girls. But you better never breathe a word about what I'd do once we get there. Understand?" I nodded. I knew Wanda was right, that I was being sent to keep an eye on her, and I felt guilty knowing that I would probably have to lie to her mother. My stomach started growling, and as I coughed loudly to muffle the sound, the dull ache that threatened my temples earlier that afternoon became a thudding reality. Mama was right. She was always right. I should have eaten before I left home. Other Mama, my maternal grandmother, made my favorite dish, chicken and dumplings, but I was too excited to even taste it. My mouth watered, and I wished I could go home, call this whole thing off. To heck with dieting. I could be curled up on the couch with a bag of potato chips, a peanut butter and banana sandwich, and a Dr. Pepper, watching Wagon Train on television instead of... The house lights blinked, and I followed Belvin and Wanda back inside. I sank down in my seat, grateful for the darkness of the theater. During intermission, I had the opportunity to observe the rest of the audience. All the male students seemed so handsome. Some of them wore powder blue blazers with the Davidson College emblem, and they smelled of English leather. Their out-of-town dates, girls from Salem College, Vassar, and Sweetbriar, with their perfect bouffant hairdos. I should never have allowed my aunt to give me that home permanent. She obviously misunderstood the directions. Appeared elegant in their villager dresses and polished to a shine bass weegeons. No one here is wearing clothes ordered from the Jewel Tea catalog, I observed bitterly. Although it helped to sit down, my physical discomfort had increased. There was now very little feeling left in my feet. The high-heeled shoes I borrowed were too long, so toilet paper had to be stuffed in the toes to keep them from falling off when I walked. I must have stuffed too much. But as the curtain lifted on Act 3, my spirits did too, somewhat. The Davidson College presentation of The Matchmaker was brilliant. I was dazzled by it. The only other real theatrical production I'd ever seen was Tom Sawyer, presented by the Masketeers, a traveling theatrical group that performed at our school every year. Suddenly I wanted to cry. Of course, crying was out of the question. It didn't matter that I was 20 miles away from home, sitting in a theater next to a vacant seat that might never be filled. It didn't matter that things were turning out all wrong. What seemed to matter was Belvin Coggins. Belvin was Wanda's latest catch. He hardly knew me. My tears would surely embarrass him in front of his friends. Wanda would be furious, consider me ungrateful and babyish. We would never be friends again. Toward the end of the third act, I began to feel sick, feverish. My eyes strayed again to the empty seat, and once more, for the 1,000,000th time, I tried to envision the blind date that was supposedly on his way. Intellectually, I assured myself he would be a nice-looking guy and that we would like each other. I knew how to dance and make polite conversation. If he wasn't good-looking, so what? He might have a winning personality. We would become close friends. I reached into my pocketbook for the pack of chewing gum other mama had given me and recalled her last-minute instructions. "Just hold this in your mouth," she said. "Don't chew it. Well-bred young women do not chew gum." I waited patiently until everyone laughed at something Dolly Levi said, then shoved 2 sticks in my mouth as fast as I could, hoping no one was watching, especially Belvin. I didn't want him to think I was the least bit concerned about my breath. It was none of his business that I'd never been kissed. Like the models in 17 magazine, I wanted to appear calm, cool, indifferent. The thought also crossed my mind that the blind date might be extremely handsome, bright, rich, and witty, and if so, he might not like me. He might even be ashamed to be seen with me. Or, worse yet, the blind date might be someone I would be ashamed to be seen with. My palms began to perspire as I thought of excuses to leave, but I couldn't just get up and sneak out like I wanted to do. A sudden attack of the flu was a possibility. But how would I get home? I'd have to call Mama and ask her to send someone to pick me up. But who? Our neighbors went to bed early. It was getting late. That left only one possibility: Daddy. Mama would agree to get him to the phone, but I'd have to ask him, beg him to come. He'd be drunk, of course. He was always drunk on Fridays, but he would come. I could see it. The battered blue '50 Chevy weaving up to the Davidson College campus. The driver slouched over the wheel with a beer in his hand. Everyone would see him, his glasses dangling cockeyed over his nose. No way! Forget it! I'd walk home first. It shouldn't take long to walk 20 miles, especially if I took off these shoes and went barefoot. It was now the 4th act. I felt tired, numb. In the middle of the act, there was a rustle at the back of the theater. Belvin looked over his shoulder, then nodded. The blind date had arrived. The pounding of my heart drowned out the dialogue on stage. In the semi-darkness, long, skinny arms protruding from the sleeves of a black, shiny jacket groped their way across the row of seats. I watched in horror as the scarecrow form with its thick padded shoulders inched forward. At last, the tall young man eased himself into the seat, and I turned cautiously, remembering not to chew my gum, to greet him. He looked familiar. Even though the horn-rimmed glasses enlarged his eyes to inhuman proportions, I knew that face and placed it immediately. Alfred E. Newman, Mad Magazine. I had seen those thick, rubbery lips stretched into that wide, idiotic grin at least 1,000 times, and when I turned, I looked into it once again. In a mild state of shock, I sat up straight and for the first time that evening focused on the play. Dolly Levi shoved Barnaby Tucker towards the footlights to address the audience. The test of an adventure," Barnaby announced in his squeaky, high-pitched voice, "is that when you're in the middle of it, you say to yourself, 'Oh, now I've got myself into an awful mess. I wish I were sitting quietly at home.'" From the corner of my eye, I glanced at Alfred. "He's got a great personality," I assured myself. God in heaven, anybody with a face like that has to be fantastic.